The idea of a relationship or even a marriage is controversial enough, but there are those who go much further and believe that Jesus didn't ascend into heaven from the cross, but actually survived the crucifixion when a deal was struck between Joseph of Arimathea, Jesus' uncle, and Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor at the time.
There's actually a couple of interesting aspects to the crucifixion that no one seems to really talk about. One of which is nobody was allowed near the crucifixion. By all accounts, people who are observing it from far away. Second of all, the very location they're observing, we're told, apparently was in Christ's uncle's garden, Joseph of Arimathea's garden. And when he is taken down from the cross, nobody can really make out much of what's going on because they're so far away. He's taken down and put into Joseph's tomb. So nobody but the people who are immediately in front of him would have been able to ascertain, was he alive, was he dead, was there a sedative on the sponge, how was that orchestrated? They just would have seen it from a distance. And you know what this does? This solves a real political problem. And the political problem is that Christ had overstayed his welcome. He was a rebel that the Romans could literally do without. But because his uncle was so well connected with this government, this Roman government, that it would appear, and it's not that far-fetched, it would appear they struck a deal. Let us make it look as though we killed him. Then you get him out of town.
According to the bloodline theory, Mary Magdalene and possibly Jesus, who was said to be a direct descendant of King David, were helped to escape to southern France, where their children married into the Merovingian line of French kings, creating a holy Davidic bloodline, which then carried on down through the centuries. Solid proof of this is sketchy, but what's interesting is that there was a group called the Desposini, meaning of the Lord, who claimed that they were direct descendants of Jesus, and who were said to have been hunted down by the church in Rome in the first few centuries AD. Not only that, but there were Jewish communities in southern France at the same time, some of whose rulers also claimed to be descended from this Davidic bloodline.
I think the whole legend that they went to the south of France is actually probably true. There's a couple reasons for that. Not only did the Romans have many settlements in the south of France, but Pontius Pilate had a residence there. So if you struck a deal with the Romans and you need a place to hide, then why not set that up in advance? And what makes it a win-win for everybody is that where he goes is French Gaul. French Gaul is the center of the Jewish world outside of Jerusalem. So it only makes sense.
I know that there's no proof to support this, but if Jesus was a descendant of King David, and if his followers in Jerusalem believed he was the Messiah, I don't think that it's a crazy notion that Pontius Pilate would have agreed to a plan to smuggle him and his partner out of Jerusalem and send them as far away as possible. When you add the fact that there are long-held traditions of Mary Magdalene, perhaps with a child, coming ashore in a boat near Marseille, the notion that she and maybe Jesus fled to this area isn't quite as outlandish as it sounds. According to local legend, the story that Mary Magdalene and her child came to southern France can be proved because they claim they are buried here in the village of Rennes-le-Château. According to the story, the village priest at the end of the 19th century, Berenger Saunière, stumbled across documents during the renovation of his church that led him to the location of something very important. Maybe a treasure or relics, or maybe, some say, the tomb of Mary Magdalene and even Jesus himself. Either way, it's a fact that this poor country priest became fabulously wealthy almost overnight before meeting a sudden and unexpected end.
way back in the 1890s, an impoverished village priest who was trying to live on a stipend that's equivalent of £6 UK a year, or 50 pence a month. Think about it, say just under $1 a month to live on, and suddenly becomes the richest man in the south of France and spends money like there's no tomorrow. He completely renovates the church, builds himself this magnificent villa, the Villa Bethania, puts statues round the church, and just spends and spends and spends.
So where did the money come from?
That remains an unsolved mystery. There is one school of thought that says he was blackmailing the Vatican because he had discovered what purported to be the tomb of Mary Magdalene, with documentation suggesting that Jesus had not been resurrected, but had survived the crucifixion, had gone off to the south of France with Mary Magdalene, where they'd raised a family and given up on all the messianic ideas in Israel, and that having found this out, in other words, Sonia was able to say to the Vatican, by the way, I found that the whole of your church is founded on a mistake, and therefore, if you pay me, I'll shut up about it. So that he was allegedly a blackmailer.
Author Robert Howells has been researching and investigating the Rennes-le-Château mystery for over 20 years. He's convinced that there is something of great importance buried there.